very much. Before we sort of start this evening, I should just make us a quick little note, if you like, that today is the eve of Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. We have, of course, a number of Jewish people with us here tonight for the New Year. I'd like to wish them Shana Tova, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, right, getting right into it. Good evening, everyone, here in the hall and online, and welcome to Pathways to Peace. Pathways to Peace is a Justice for Palestine, Palestinians initiative, and this is the second of our series of Pathways to Peace events. Before we start, a quick note for our Zoom participants. Please keep your video off and mute your voice. Please type any questions you might have in the chat box. Type questions in capital so we notice it. If you have any problems with your connection, we strongly recommend you try refreshing your browser. That usually seems to correct issues. For those in the hall, the fire escapes are there and the front door. That leads directly out the front door. Okay, toilets are just inside the front door. The meeting will end at 8:50 at the latest, so we can't on from that point. Our guests, of course, need to go home. Thank you very much. They've come a long way. So, my name is Barclay Lane. Some of you know me, of course. I'm a facilitator. I'll be making notes of your good ideas throughout the evening. And it's, of course, a great privilege to welcome you here tonight. Thank you all for coming. We witnessed a brutal slaughter in Gaza and the deadly oppression in the West Bank and Jerusalem daily. We see the horrors of the bombing of Lebanon, and we note our government's collusion in genocide. Tonight we ask, what can we do? It is my honour to introduce your speakers and your moderator. So, next to Georgina, right there, is Richard Burton, who was the Labour MP for Birmingham Northwood from 1992 to 2019. Quite a stint. He is Vice Chair of Labour Friends of Palestine and the Trustee of the esteemed Balfour project. He was formerly the Chair of Medical Aid for Palestinians and was also the former Chair of Britain-Palestine All-Party Parliamentary Group. Louise Regan, right at the far end there from me, was elected to Chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in March 2024. Congratulations. She was formerly the President of the National Union of Teachers and is currently a member of the executive of the National Education Union and chair of its international committee, where she fights for Palestinian rights. Next to her is Marwan Yaghi. Hope I pronounced your surname correctly.
Perfectly.
Good. He is a human rights lawyer and serves as political officer of the UK Palestinian Mission, which of course every decent person calls their embassy. He works with the Palestinians ambassador, Sam Zomhot, on a daily basis. Our moderator tonight is a member, of course, of Justice for Palestinians. She's on our active group. I'd like just to tell you very, very briefly a little bit about something she wrote to me. Her father is Palestinian, was made a refugee in 1948 when her Jewish grandmother was given the chance to stay in the newly created state of Israel, or to follow her Christian Arab husband and children into exile in Lebanon. It wasn't much of a choice. She remembers her grandmother talking about the multicultural and beautiful place that was Palestine, where she grew up, a place where Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived in peace for centuries. It is her ardent desire that this becomes a reality again. Quite something. With that, it's time for me to hand over to Georgina. Thank you very much indeed. I'll hand over the mic.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Marwan, our first speaker, and we're each going to have about 15 minutes tops for them to talk about what we can do. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Brothers and sisters, friends, thank you for coming today. Such moving, important, timely important event with a very much important, title, what can we do? Allow me first to thank Barclay Lane, Joan, Georgina, for their efforts and their important work and for today's event. I'm honored to share the platform with Louise Regan, the chair of the BSC, and also Richard Berg. Friends, I come to you today bearing a very simple message. Don't stop. Don't stop talking. Don't stop demanding. Don't stop educating. Don't stop protesting. And most importantly, don't stop hoping. Because I can tell you, you are making a difference. I can tell you that the demonstration for Palestine that we can see everywhere, from South America to Africa, from Europe to America, from Asia to the Middle East, having a powerful impact. These protests are powerful, not just because of their size, frequency, impressive as that is. They are powerful because every demonstration, every protest is an effect holding government and politicians to account. Every time hundreds of thousands of people demonstrate in London or anywhere in the UK, it sends the message to the British government: act, your people demand it. It sends a message to the British government that this is not just about Palestine, it's about justice everywhere. It sends a message that what we are seeing unfold in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, is unacceptable to any decent human being. It is unacceptable to humanity. It sends a message that there must be a change, not just for the Palestinian people, but for the future. All of our futures, because this is what we are truly protesting about. We are protesting the uneven application of international law. We are protesting the unconscionable oppression of an entire people for over a century. We are demanding an end to this injustice. And this is where I will repeat my message: don't stop. Because this will not end with a ceasefire. A ceasefire, of course, is a first priority. But the worst thing that could happen if the world turns away when the bloodshed stops. It is truly inspiring that so many people in so many countries from all walks of life find the time and compassion to protest the spilling of our blood. Our task now is to continue with the same spirit and the same passion to demand an end to occupation, a return of our refugees, and accountability and commitment to international law. Our task now is to continue to press the point that our struggle did not start on October the 7th. It will not finish when the killing stops. It will finish only when the Palestinian people are free and able to determine their own destinies in their own state. And it is precisely now that we must seize the momentum. This unprecedented global outpouring of solidarity has brought in order to move the conversation forward. We must use this global momentum to press the case that justice for Palestinians is simply justice. We must spell out that justice for Palestinians is what peace looks like. And we must press the case that justice for Palestinians and the struggle against racism, including anti-Semitism, are not mutually incompatible. In fact, they are the same struggle. Racism is fundamentally the idea that people are different and should have different rights depending on their race, religion, or ethnicity. Justice for Palestinians is demanding equality. The struggle is the same. Justice is comprehensive, not partial. Justice is global, not local. There is no justice for one. There is only justice to all. We are witnessing the wholesale destruction of the global post-World War II rules-based order. Friends, Israel's assault on Gaza is nothing short of genocidal. The scale of killing, destruction, the mass displacement, and the obvious attempt to emptying the land of its people. And we're now seeing and witnessing that happening also in Lebanon. The clear intent voiced by senior Israeli leaders, from the Prime Minister, the President, and down, and the appalling international response from those who could make a difference, has brought the international system to an existential crisis. Legal restraint on practices in war have all been eroded. In fact, there is clear and well-documented intent to target civilians. 70% of nearly 120,000 who have been killed, injured, or have disappeared have been women and children. There is a clear intent by Israel's political leadership to harm as many as possible in its act of collective punishment, including cutting off water, electricity, food, and fuel supplies to Gaza. In Gaza's north, some 300,000 people are still starving. And in the south, where some 2/3 of Gaza's population of 2.3 million people have been forcibly displaced, 1.4 million people are crammed into inhuman conditions in al-Mawasil, sleeping in makeshift tents on streets, schools, open farmland, in any space they can find, being ordered to move to another area that is still a target for a military operation is not evacuation, as the media reported. It is forced displacement. It is depopulation. According to the WHO, there is one shower per 4,500 people. There's one toilet per 200 people. They are at risk of famine, of infectious diseases like cholera, hepatitis A, etc. They have nowhere to go. Enough. Enough. This is truly must end now. And the first priority for us is a ceasefire. But now, and to anyone concerned about justice and law and the rules-based international order, cannot continue. We hear a lot about international law when it comes to Ukraine, but why not when it comes to Palestine, Lebanon, Sudan? However, and yet, I'm hopeful. Yes, we are hopeful because of people like you. We're hopeful because there exists in the UK, just as there does right across the world. Enormous solidarity for the Palestinian cause. I'm hopeful because out of 193 members of the UN, 149 have recognized the state of Palestine. It is countries in the West largely that are lagging. I'm hopeful because where government fear to trade in such an absurdly unjust situation, the people will step in. They will step in. It happened before. It happened with South Africa, and it will happen over Palestine. It's already happening in Palestine. I've lost count of the number of demonstrations and protests that have brought hundreds of thousands of ordinary people into the streets in protest at Israeli ongoing illegal and immoral genocide. This is public pressure. And this comes in many forms. It comes in twinning agreements with Palestinian towns and cities. It comes in solidarity bike rides. It comes in demonstration, in letters to your local MPs, in letters to local and national newspapers and media. It comes in conversation with your families, your friends, and your neighbors. It comes in community action. It comes because to most people, clear injustice wherever it may occur, is unacceptable. In the words of Martin Luther King, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The best way to help bring peace with justice is first not to be despondent. The wheel of history is turning on Palestine, and it will point itself toward justice. And second, carry on what you are doing. Intensify your efforts. Reach out to your communities. The story of Palestine is easy to tell. It is simply the story of people denied their legitimate right for 3/4 of a century. It is about people who refuse to be denied their rights. It is about the steadfastness and courage of the Palestinian people in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and everywhere. And it is about the courage and the determination of those who stand in solidarity. But it's not just about Palestine. It is about adherence to and respect for international law. And with that, a commitment to a global rules-based order that is our best hope in these difficult times, where global challenges are flourishing, from war to environment to unequal distribution of resources and wealth. No one should be exempt from their duties under law, just as no one should be unfairly denied their legal and legitimate rights. So act, speak, cycle, protest, write letters, bore your friends, and constantly remind your politician that justice for Palestine must not be delayed. Demand action, assert your right to boycott, reject any financial dealing with Israeli settlements. Hold your companies and business people to the same standards. Expect your parliament to act upon its own 2014 vote to recognize the state of Palestine on 1967 borders, and rest assured that you are on the right side of history. It is through our combined efforts that we will once and for all see justice in Palestine. Thank you.
Delighted to hand over the mic to Richard.
Thanks very much, Georgie, and thanks very much to Justice for Palestinians for organising tonight's meeting. It's great to see so many people here and all those joining online as well. And can I also add to what you said about the shout over to all celebrating the Jewish New Year. The title of tonight's meeting, as you said, Georgie, is What We Can Do. And I'm sure I'm not alone tonight in sometimes feeling just an incredible frustration of wondering if anything can be done to change the horrific scenes we're seeing, the horrific events that have been unfolding, particularly over the last year. Nobody can claim not to know what is going on in Israel and Palestine. Everybody sees the images on their TV screens, and even despite the sanitization that sometimes comes across in the mainstream media, social media brings the truth to so many people. And all the polls show that in this country, public support for more assertive action by our government and by governments internationally, it's not a minority opinion, it's what most people think. But it carries on. And it just seems to get worse. Even more so just in the last few days with Israel's invasion of Lebanon, missiles fired from Iran, and the likelihood of Israeli strikes on Iran itself. And I think all of us can have understandable human reactions to that sense of frustration. First of all, despair that just nothing can be done. We turn off our TVs literally, and we turn off our activism figuratively. Or we get consumed by anger that we just want to lash out in response in any way we can. Both of those are absolutely understandable human reactions. But we owe it not just to ourselves, but to humanity, not to give in to that despair. As for anger, well, anger, is important. It's important to feel anger. That's an important part of pressuring governments to act in the way that Marwan has urged us all to do. But what we must do is to ensure that that anger is channeled in a way that achieves something in practice. Because our reactions can't principally be about our own feelings, but what stands most chance of bringing to an end the nightmare that the people of Gaza have been going through for the past year, that can halt the annexation of occupied land in the West Bank, that can stop the bombs that are now bringing to Lebanon the kind of nightmare, the kind of scenes that Gaza has witnessed over the last year and beyond. And also the kind of action that can create the conditions for the return of innocent hostages taken on October the 7th to their families, however little priority that seems to figure in the objectives of Benjamin Netanyahu. And also our actions have got to be designed to what stands most chance of stopping a broader regional war and all the death and destruction that that will bring. I also think it's important, though, to recognise there's not one way, not one single way where we can achieve that change. There's no single silver bullet that will stop Netanyahu being Netanyahu, that will make a democratic president in the USA or a Labour prime minister here in the UK find the backbone to drop the double standards and translate their stated respect for international law into practice when it comes to the Middle East. If change is going to come, it's going to come, I think, from a combination of different actions in different environments that will achieve it. Part of that are the public demonstrations that Marwan rightly drew attention to, and credit to Louise and to PSC for the way they've organised absolutely fantastic demonstrations throughout the last year in support of the people of Gaza and in support of justice in Israel and Palestine. Part of it will be direct pressure on politicians to show them that it's actually in their self-interest to take a more assertive step. And part of it will actually be sometimes less public or more coded lobbying of leaders by parliamentarians and lobby groups operating in the political arena to show those leaders that practical actions that they can and must take, both at home and in international multilateral forums like the United Nations. And part of it will be the provision of practical support, essential medical and other humanitarian aid. I used to chair medical aid for Palestinians, and I know how vital their work is. And please keep the donations coming in. All of those things are important. Different people can make different contributions. The key thing is that those contributions are complementary. We need those inside the room, and we need people outside threatening to kick down the doors. None of us should pretend that our way is the only way. So what should our focus be right now? Like many, perhaps most of you, disappointment as a Labour member that I feel doesn't come close to capturing what I've felt about the failures of the leadership of my party to speak out decisively over the last year. Same again, I have to say, in the last 24 hours, with the statement our current Prime Minister made. He was right to condemn Iran's missile attacks on Israel. I personally have no objection to UK forces cooperating, however they did, in simply defensive actions, cooperating to intercept those missiles and so on. But the issue was that the comments that were made yesterday were entirely one-sided. Not a word about Israel's invasion of Lebanon, about the 1,000 dead or the 1 million displaced that we've already seen now in the last 2 weeks alone. Not a word about Israel's own actions and the provocations that Israel and Netanyahu have made over the last weeks and months that make a regional war still more likely. He said that Britain stands with Israel
but was there any word about Israel's action today, where the Foreign Minister of Israel said that no less than the Secretary General of the United Nations would no longer be allowed to enter Israel. It's fine to say stand with Israel, but really what should have been said is that Britain stands with civilians, whether they be in Israel, whether they be in Iraq, whether they be in Lebanon, or whether they be in Palestine. And if we stand for any objective, the stand has got to be for de-escalation, for justice, and for peace. And the reason I felt particularly disappointed about that statement yesterday is because Labour in government has actually made some important changes to the grotesquely one-sided approach of the previous government. Labour has restored UK funding to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, funding that shouldn't have been cut in the first place. It has been calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and in fairness in Lebanon as well, something that even the Blair government did not do in 2006 in the last Lebanon war. And Labour in government has dropped the Sunak government's attempt to thwart the ability of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court to pronounce on Israel's occupation and whether or not it is legal or illegal, and the application of the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to apply to that court for arrest warrants for Netanyahu, for Israel's defense minister, and for a number of leaders of Hamas. And the Labour government has suspended 30 licenses for arms exports to Israel. Now, none of those changes go far enough, but all of those are real and all are important. And that's where I echo what Marwan says. Never think your work, your pressure doesn't have an impact. Those changes would not have happened were it not the pressure that's been put on. Our job now is to press for the logic of those changes to be followed through. On arms exports, Britain's legal responsibility, both under our own laws and under the International Arms Trade Treaty, is to withhold export licenses for arms where there is a known risk that they will be used to violate international humanitarian law. That was the reason given by the Foreign Secretary for suspending the export of UK-produced parts for F-16 fighters, because they would be used in Gaza. So it makes absolutely no sense to suspend those exports, but to maintain exports for the supply of components to F-35 fighters, which are doing precisely the same thing. Now, ministers say that they don't have control over things like the export of arms, of components for F-35 fighters, because they go through a global distribution hub, which Britain hasn't got any control over. Frankly, that does not get them off the hook. Our obligations under international treaties to which we're a party is to assess the end use to which our arms exports will be put. And if there's a risk of international humanitarian law being violated, then those exports, those licenses should and must be suspended. And even though, you know, UK arms make up only a fraction of Israel's arsenal, suspending them in line with our internationally recognised obligations does make a difference. And it does put considerable pressure on the United States to do the same. And the evidence that 2,000 bombs that are being used at the moment by Israel to flatten tower blocks in Beirut, the evidence is that they were supplied by the USA. That underlines that everything that we can do to hasten a change in US policy on arms exports, we should do. Secondly, we must redouble our efforts to uphold the primacy of international law and the decisions of international legal institutions. Ministers in the UK say they're still considering the International Court of Justice's ruling that Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is illegal. Our job is to press them to reach conclusions on that consideration and to do it soon. And the ICJ's ruling, you know, was crystal clear. It said, and I quote, Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. The state of Israel is under an obligation to bring to an end its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. And that ruling went on to say that all states should, quote, should not render aid or assistance in maintaining the situation created by the continued presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. Therefore, that ruling by the world's top court was not just about Israel, it was about all states, it was about us too. And we have got the conclusions that have to flow from them. When the occupation itself and settlements on occupied land are illegal, and they've been ruled to be illegal, UK trade with those settlements is colluding with that illegality. It should be banned. It should have stopped before now. We've got to redouble the pressure to stop those commercial dealings with the occupation that Marwan talked about. Now, in opposition, Labour did say that if Israel annexed the West Bank, the Labour government would ban UK trade with settlement. The ruling by the International Court of Justice has confirmed that the way Israel is acting in its rule of the West Bank shows that it considers its occupation to be permanent, not temporary. That is annexation, whatever Israel may or may not call it. And Labour ministers should keep to the promises they made in opposition and put them into practice in government. And that's got to mean ending commercial dealings with the occupation and with illegal settlements. Okay, I will be as quick as I can. I did ask Georgie to remind me if I was rabbiting on. Now, the United Nations General Assembly a couple of weeks ago, the UK abstained on a resolution calling on all states to implement the ICJ ruling. The UK representative of the UN claimed that that didn't mean that we questioned the ICJ's conclusions, simply that the resolution under discussion didn't say how a negotiated settlement could be taken forward. Now, I want to see a negotiated settlement between Israel and Palestine as much as anybody else, but that ruling is not about negotiations. It's not actually about politics. It's about upholding international law. And nobody in Britain, and certainly our own government, has got any business being ambiguous about that. But if we do want to see a negotiated settlement, now has got to be the time. The UK can to show that it considers both the parties to the situation between Israel and Palestine, both of the parties that are going to be central to those negotiations, to be equal. And that can only be done by immediately recognising the state of Palestine alongside Israel, in conformity, as Marwan said, with the resolution that was passed by the House of Commons in 2014. Last thing I'll say is this, and it's just about what's going on currently in Lebanon and Israel. If the UK is true to its word about upholding the international rules-based order that was established after the Second World War, then events between Israel and Iran do not alter the urgency of a ceasefire, whether it be in Gaza or in Lebanon as well. The fact that missiles were fired from Iran into Israel does not in any way undermine or alter the absolute vital necessity for immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. We've got to be clear that we call for the implementation of United Nations Resolution 1701 that ended the 2006 war in Lebanon. If you hear how political leaders in the West are talking about that at the moment, you would think that that resolution places obligations on one side, but it places obligations on Hezbollah. That United Nations resolution applied to both sides, Israel and Hezbollah. And we've got to be clear in pressing argument to say that the obligations that it placed on both sides have got to be carried through in practice. And if either side fails to carry through its obligations under that resolution, then sanctions should follow. So there's just a few examples of why I think, whilst all of us feel the despair, the frustration of what's going on, that's natural. We've got to keep going. As Marwan said, we need to ensure that our actions are complementary. We operate in different forums, but those actions got to be complementary. They've always got to be focused on what is going to be achievable. And there are things I've laid out, just a few of the things where I think we should focus those actions on things we can press our own government and the international community to do. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and if you haven't, just a small housekeeping note, can you please turn your mobile phones on to silent, please? Handing over to Louise now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for organising it, a very important meeting and very timely. And I'm very pleased to be here. So I'm going to start with some sort of factual information, and I am going to talk about what I think people should do, but I don't think we should forget the current situation, and I think facts are very important when you're talking to people. So currently, that over 42,000 Palestinians have now been killed in Israel's war on Gaza, and over 2/3 of them are women and children. In March of this year, the UN reported that more children have been killed in Gaza in 4 months than in 4 years of war worldwide, and thousands more children have been killed since that point. 10 children a day currently in Gaza face an amputation with no anaesthetic, and at least 3,000 children in Gaza have had at least one limb amputated. Outside of Gaza, across the West Bank, attacks have increased significantly, with over 650 Palestinians killed since October, and an organisation called Defence for Children International Palestine, if you don't know it, go onto their website, 2 weeks ago released a report called Targeting Childhood, Palestinian Children Killed by Israeli Forces and Settlers in the Occupied West Bank. It states that 20% of the Palestinian children killed by Israeli forces and settlers in the West Bank since 2000 have been killed since October the 7th, at a rate of 1 child every 2 days. And now we are seeing the conflict escalating across the region, with thousands killed in Lebanon and bombs dropping daily. And despite all of this, our political leaders continue to sell Israel weapons, even as it stands charged in the International Court of Justice for the crime of genocide. It's obscene to continue arms sales at a time when 2 senior Israeli government leaders stand personally accused of crimes against humanity, including extermination and murder, starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, intentionally directing acts against the civilian population, persecution, and willfully causing great suffering. The supposed safe zones in Gaza are facing repeated attacks, and evacuation orders are forcing already displaced civilians into increasingly overcrowded and uninhabitable shelters. And as Marwan has explained, the situation there is horrific for them. Palestinians are facing bombardment from the sea, air and land, with images of burned and decapitated children becoming a regular occurrence on our social media feeds. 85% of schools in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. All 12 of the universities have been completely destroyed. 625,000 students in Gaza have had no access to education for an entire school year. They have witnessed horrific and terrifying events. The trauma they have suffered will take years if they are ever able to overcome that. And now the people of Gaza are on the brink of another crisis, because polio has returned for the first time in 25 years, posing an unimaginable threat to all of Gaza's children. The outbreak is a direct result of Israel's destruction of Gaza's health and sanitation infrastructure. Agencies and medical professionals from around the globe have called for an immediate ceasefire to allow for the vaccination of Gaza's children, and yet still Israel's bombs continue, and medics are refused entry to implement the vaccination program. So, as other people have said, it is absolutely right that every ounce of our energy at the moment is focused on calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. That's why Palestine Solidarity Campaign has continued our marches. We're now on to the 21st March this Saturday, with hundreds of thousands of people continuing to turn out onto the streets calling for that. And as has also been pointed out, we know there is huge public support for that. The majority of the public in this country support that position and think that there should be an immediate and permanent ceasefire. We also need to continue to call for the ending of weapons sales to Israel and put pressure on our politicians. We are aware the government has ended some arms sales, less than 10% of the arms sales that they issue to Israel, but a comprehensive end to all arms sales is a necessary step towards ending our country's complicity in Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people. One example of the arms that is traded is the F-35 fighter jet that has been referred to. Campaign Against Arms Trade reported that the UK provides around 15% of the components in that jet. An aircraft that it was revealed a couple of weeks ago was used in a massacre committed in July of this year in Al-Mawasi camp, killing 90 Palestinians and injuring at least 300. Just after that report was released, F-35s were used yet again to hit Al-Mawasi camp, killing at least 40 people at that time. Amnesty UK and at least 18 other charities have called on the UK to end all arms sale transfers to Israel immediately. Right now, Palestinians are standing in the dark, but we know that they will rise again as they have always done. Our task is to stand with them, to escalate our actions and to keep speaking out. Palestinians regularly tell us that they don't need our tears, they need our voices as theirs are silence. But they need more than our words, they need our actions too. And this is where we need to think about what we do. Because this involves not only protesting on the streets, which is massively important, and I urge all of you to get along to national and local demonstrations, but also pushing forward with the boycott, divestment and sanction campaign. That campaign was set up by Palestinian civil society. Boycott National Committee co-founder spoke to a group of trade unionists a few weeks ago, and he talked about the term getting genocide weary. But what he said to us was, the people of Gaza don't have the privilege of being able to get weary of genocide. It is happening to them every day. So we don't have the privilege of being weary either, which is why we really must push forward with the boycott campaign. Palestinian trade unionists have called for the global trade union movement to pressure organisations and companies complicit with Israel's crimes. And that call makes explicit the need for trade union to build boycott, divestment and sanction campaigns. So I would urge all of you in the room, if you are a member of a trade union, to go back to your trade union and ask them what they are doing to make sure that they are not complicit with what is happening, that they do not have any links with organisations that are complicit, and that they make their unions apartheid-free zones. I would also urge you all to take part in the PSC's local days of action. Our target at the moment is Barclays Bank. The reason that that is our target is because that is what the Boycott National Committee, the BDS campaign, have asked us to focus on as a target. However, you can also boycott goods and services from a whole range of organisations that are set out on the Boycott National Committee's website. The other thing that I think that you can do, and I think you already do this here, is make sure that you are out on the streets talking to people. I think it is really important that we continue to share the message of the Palestinian people and talk about what is happening to them. And the more that we educate those around us, the more we build people who are supporters of our movement and who use their voices alongside ours. So alongside putting pressure on politicians, we also need to talk and raise awareness in our communities. And also the other campaign that we are targeting heavily at the moment is local councils to make sure that the local government pension scheme is divested. So again, that's a very good target. It's a very useful thing to do, and is another way of engaging with trade unions. And I will end with this really. There is much that we must continue to do in building our movement, but we cannot and we must not stop until there is a permanent ceasefire, until the genocide is ended, until all the walls of apartheid are dismantled, and until the day when Palestinians are finally free. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor to you all. If you have any questions to any of the panelists, please ask, letting us know who you're directing your question to. But just equally as important is what you bring to the party, any ideas that you have. This is first and foremost an open discussion, an ideation session, allowing us all to sort of put our point of view across as to what we can all do. And we've had some amazing ideas. I'm opening up the floor. Does anyone have any questions or ideas? Yes. We have 2 microphones. So there was one idea that you floated, Marwan, that I thought was great, which was the idea of twinning cities. How would we like Leamington Spa to be twinned with Gaza? Anyone?
Maybe with Rafah, actually.
With Gaza?
Yeah, there's a lot of like conversation happening on Gaza about Gaza, but Rafah still no one taken. So let's go with Rafah maybe.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay.
It's not Warwick.
Warwick. Yeah, why don't we put Warwick?
Can't Eunice.
Yeah, or Deir Balah.
Yeah.
So there's many, yeah.
Okay.
Questions?
It's not a question, it's to make people aware that there's a campaign out there for withholding the taxes and the Terrorism Act. It's perfectly lawful, it's a lawful way to do it. And apparently, not only is it lawful, but we should all actually be doing it because we're all breaking Section 17 of the Terrorism Act by continuing to pay taxes. That's all taxes, income tax, VAT, car tax, wherever you can withhold it. It says in the Terrorism Act, it actually says, Section 17 says, a person commits an offence if he enters into or becomes concerned in an arrangement as a result of which money or other property is made available to another and he knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that it will or may be used for purposes of terrorism. And the Supreme Court actually, there's a Supreme Court ruling that says that, just trying to find where I wrote that down as well, sorry. The definition of terrorism would appear to extend to military or quasi-military activity aimed at bringing down a foreign government, even when the activity is approved officially or unofficially by the UK government. The argument is that it's everyone's responsibility to withhold their taxes. And there's a website, poverty.co, that has all the paperwork and all the information on it. I just wanted to make people aware of that.
Write that down. Thank you. And to add to that, all of the funds are actually held in trust, so we don't get to keep all that money and earn interest on it. It's actually withheld temporarily, but what a great way to impact. Yes. Right.
Thank you to all the speakers. It was really educational. My question is that the UK is a signatory to all these international laws, and it is the government who quite blatantly breaking those. So why can't we, as the public, take them to court and ask for judicial review, or at least organise funding and publicly fund such processes?
There is actually an organisation called the International Centre for Justice for Palestinians who are involved in that kind of agenda, is actually looking at where UK politicians, either individually or collectively, as political parties or as governments, are actually in breach of international law in different ways. The one most commonly talked about is whether we are complicit in breaches of the Genocide Convention. So you know, there are organisations that will look at that.
I'm wondering how we as a collective can get behind that. Where is it based? Is it?
It's based in London, International Centre of Justice for Palestinians. They've got a website,
Yeah,
very easy to find. They go under the sort of pseudonym ICJP.
okay.
Can we put these things up on?
Newsletter.
Put it on the board, I think she was asking.
Yeah.
Of course, ICJP, Tyre Valley, spoke to us last time.
That's
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, just like one point, also like the dual citizen, British. Yeah, so the dual citizens, British people who have been like fighting in Gaza, also is being, there's a huge legal work is being commenced and happening now behind the scene about like considering taking them on trial, yeah, and being, yeah, hold them to account for such to be indulged in war crimes in Gaza. So this is also like is being happening by some legal groups in the UK.
I mean, also actually Amnesty International and the Campaign Against Arms Trade are also looking at various legal angles of putting pressure on the government as well. So it's worthwhile checking their websites.
Just a thought, if we could add some of these links to our newsletter, that would be great. Thank you. Yes.
I've come along to this through the UN, they have circulated the information. I'm sorry I missed your first talk, so maybe some of these questions are not relevant. I've lived in Amman for a year. I've lived in Israel and Nazareth in our town for 3 years, working as a doctor there. I've worked in northern Jordan and most recently as volunteer in previous year 2023. I just find this all very one-sided, guys. I'm sorry to say that. And the question to Marwan is, and I think he said it, but I just want him to make it clear, because certainly Hamas do not recognize this, Marwan. Do you recognize that the 1948 armistice line with Israel on one side and Transjordan, as it was in those days, is something that you would like to re-achieve? I think you did say that that's where you want Israel to withdraw to the 48 border, and you like then the Palestinian Authority, which is no authority actually in Gaza, as I'm sure you know, there was a civil war and Hamas kicked out and killed a lot of the Fatah people in 2007. And I think it's important that we all recognize this when we're talking about Gaza. The Palestinian Authority can't come in and make a post-Israeli invasion government or regime legal because they have no authority.
Can I
So
just get you to clarify the question?
So the question is, do we, unlike Hamas, recognize that Israel has a right to the borders of 1948? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Firstly, let's not get diverted on the issue and coming to the Palestinian Authority not having any presence in Gaza and why that, and Hamas fighting with Fatah and being kicked off the West Bank, and because the main issue is occupation, and when we are talking about occupation, we're talking about 1967. So let's not get diverted here on conflict. And I think the main issue that, me as a Gazan, born and raised in Gaza, I don't have the right or the permission to go to the West Bank, me as an individual. So imagine how a government can, like as a Palestinian Authority, can go and have to do or have its work normally in Gaza. They're not allowed because of occupation. Mainly, the core issue is occupation. And by the ICJ, saying last month or in July that this is not just occupation, this is illegal, unlawful occupation that needs to be ended now and today. This is the main issue, and let's not get diverted with the whole thing about Hamas, and because that, as I mentioned, it didn't happen or start on the 7th of October. Even with Lebanon, the issue is not just by Hezbollah being launching rockets in Israel, because still Israel is occupying lands of Lebanon. We don't need, we cannot normalize the situation. Like, okay, let them like just go to, let's apply the 1701 resolution and everything going to go back to normal. But the normal was illegal because it is occupation, because Israel is still occupying Lebanon, a part of Lebanon, part of Syria, and Gaza and the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, annexing East Jerusalem and annexing many parts of the West Bank. So I think we should be very much focused on the main thing, which is ending occupation. This is the road to peace, and not just we don't need any peace, we need a just peace. Oslo was a way to peace. It wasn't a just peace, but we had to go through this road. Hopefully Israel will accept to have down the road a state of Palestine. But no, Israel killed any way, any path to reach to a two-state solution. And now Israel is completely denying or canceling the whole thing about the two-state solution, and not just in a speech. No, it's into law, through the Knesset. So it is big what's happening.
I'll just add one thing to that, because I think you put a challenge about the 1948 lines. That is at the centre of the demand to recognise the state of Palestine. The resolution that went through the House of Commons in 2014 was absolutely explicit that Britain should recognise the state of Palestine alongside Israel, not as a consequence of negotiations, but as a contribution to those negotiations, and as a demonstration that we see both the rights of Israelis and Palestinians as equals. As I say, it's 10 years now since that resolution was passed. It's about time the government implemented it.
Also, like, one of the Oslo outcome was that the Palestinian also recognized Israel as a state. However, according to a 1948 resolution in the UN, there was a condition that Israel will recognize a state of Palestine as a condition for its, but it didn't happen. So let's focus here that we need, one of the main things now to focus on is the recognition.
And we are here to support Palestine. If someone is not very comfortable with that, maybe it's not the place for them.
We welcome everybody's opinions and their contributions.
But we don't attack other people's opinions. I don't go to someone's house and tell them they are wrong. Sorry about that, but I don't go to someone's house. I follow the rules. Here we are all for justice for Palestine. I'm sorry.
I'd like to bring us back to the conversation in question, because we can talk all night about the problem. That's not going to make the problem go away. We're here to come up with a solution. So I'm going to call us back to this, which is the brief for today. So can I open up to the floor again for anybody else who has ideas or questions about what can we do to end the genocide and create the just peace? Yes. Yeah.
Hi, this is Louise. I've got a question really about the NU. So, as far as I'm aware, the NU have been quite supportive of Palestine. However, they're very ambiguous in terms of field of getting that information across. I'm part of the NU as teacher. I struggle, I want your opinion on this. The government guidelines on impartiality are essentially a way of muzzling staff. We've got to be really careful with everything we say. Because of this whole false narrative of
they're very true, the narrative of both sides are equally at fault, which I don't agree with, and I don't agree with what that gentleman said. I would argue Hamas are the symptom, not the cause. How is it then as teachers to have some guidance? I've tried to look on any website and struggle to find something really clear to show that we should be talking about Palestine, because all the impartiality stuff, it's very ambiguous language. As I said, I feel as teachers it's a way of stopping me really talking openly about it with students. So your thoughts on that, or any advice?
Yes, I mean, it does get raised quite a lot. We do have a section of our website that is specifically devoted now to the situation in Gaza, with a document which is advice for our members about what they should be doing. We're very clear that this should be being talked about in our schools and colleges, because actually these are exactly the sort of issues that if we don't talk about them, children and young people will go away and find other ways to find information about what is happening, and sometimes that might not be the information we want them to be looking at. It might not be information that is accurate. It might, it potentially is difficult. So we do encourage members to talk about it, and there is a wealth of information on our website about it. We also encourage members to take part in the workplace days of action that are being called by Palestine Solidarity Campaign and Stop the War and others in that coalition. But it is very mixed. So there are places where there are lots of things happening, and that generally is where members are more confident to do that, because they have done that prior to October. Because that is one issue, so, to be fair, within our curriculum, there are very few opportunities, a very prescriptive curriculum in our schools now. There are very few opportunities to talk about wider global issues often. So where schools have already embedded that, it tends to be being talked about more. And where the NEU has for many years now taken delegations to Palestine regularly of our members. So we used to, prior to October, we were taking 2 delegations a year in February and October half terms of around 15 to 20 members, all people who had not visited the region before, had very limited knowledge about the situation. And those members, because we have taken so many now, often are very active within their schools and have built up resources and feel more confident to talk about it. Are we doing enough? Well, we could probably not. We could do more. But we are continuing to develop resources. In fact, at the start of this meeting, I was just writing a motion for our annual conference around this issue and what more we can be doing. But certainly grab me at the end. You can have my contact details, and I'm happy to share everything that I've got with you. And I'm happy for you to contact me at any point if you want further.
Just a couple of just quick practical suggestions as well. In terms of generating discussion with school students, both CABU, the Council for Our British Understanding, they have a programme of visits to schools to assist them to do it in quite a sensitive way of enabling students to talk about the issue between Israel and Palestine. And the other organisation, I'm a trustee of a body that's got a dreadful name, but it's very good, a charity called the Balfour Project. And we do, don't get me started on it. It came about through various good historical reasons. However, we do, again, a schools programme of assistance to teachers in trying to frame discussions that can be acceptable within the curriculum, but can actually enable young people to start talking about the issues at stake here. So again, both of those have got websites to go and have a look at.
Sorry, can I just...
Was it CABU, did you say?
CABU, yeah, CAABU. The other organisation is MACAN, which is a Palestinian group who have fantastic resources on their website, and they do a lot of work with visualising Palestine, and there's some really good resources on the Visualising Palestine website as well, which you can use. It sort of depends which age group you work with, obviously, where you would go in terms of that, but yeah, do get in touch.
Okay.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
On board.
Yeah, we've got CABU, CAABU, we've got the Balfour Project, and we've got MACAS. How do you spell Macan?
MAKAN. I can send you, I'll email you all
Yeah.
the links to all of those.
Yeah.
So it's MAKAN.
So sorry.
MAKAN and the Balfour project, the programs and visits to schools.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you. I actually have a couple of questions that were emailed in, talking about keeping the conversation going. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are of what recommendations you may have for us to promote the dialogue more openly and more objectively in the national and the local media.
Silence.
Can you just check the mics on?
Sorry, did everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
Right. Testing, testing. No, the mic's gone. Okay, let's try again. Could we stop the mic? It's gone. Thanks very much. We'll share.
Anyone want to take that? Maybe we should make it here, the microphone.
I mean, media these days is clearly a lot more flexible than it used to be. Getting the issue raised in the mainstream local and national media is important, but again, don't ignore the impact of social media. And the other thing I'd say about that is don't just rely on, I mean, amongst those of us that are politically active, we tend to be Twitter addicts. In terms of getting across to people who are not already engaged in this issue, Twitter is not necessarily the best medium to do that. You know, remember things like Facebook for older generations. Remember things like TikTok and Instagram for younger generations. Really, really important. In terms of getting things, in terms of, if you like, the mainstream media, you always need to have a handle, a hook to put your comments onto to stand those chance of getting something published. So a personal story, a relation who's over there, somebody you know, I know members of this group have been involved in things like the ecumenical accompaniment program. Personal experience of what's happening counts for a great deal, and will stand often a lot more chance of getting published. And again, if it's local media, play the local angle on that. Play the fact that this is somebody from Langton, from Warwick, or from Kenilworth, and emphasise that. I mean, your own MP at the moment is taking a convoy, part of a convoy to Ukraine. Very, very important. But the fact he's the Warwick and Leamington MP actually means that is getting more profile than it otherwise would do in this area. So do play on the local angle of that. The other thing I'd just say, just in a general rule, and I was going to say something about this in my closing remarks. Sometimes we have a tendency to talk to ourselves. We are rightly really angry about what's going on. And sometimes we spend our time reinforcing our own anger. Now that's important, there is a role for that. Quite therapeutic in many ways. But ultimately, I think our job is to try to get across to people who do not already agree with us, who either don't know or who disagree. And therefore, the way we frame our advocacy, I think we should always try and bear in mind, will this convince anybody else rather than people who are already convinced?
I think also like one thing I want to add, which is our role in scrutiny, what the media is writing and how the language that they're like using. And especially with kind of the mainstream media like BBC, like Sky News, the way that they're like reporting what's happening in Gaza, especially when it comes to language like the death of Palestinian. I think there is a huge role and task here for the public is to write and complain against these mainstream media. It happened and it's worked very much like good. I think we should maybe have like kind of like a guidance how we can play a role like normal people, how they can like change what is being reported, the way that they're like reporting stuff with it. If it was unbalanced language, if it was like misleading language, sometimes they like just writing like a strike have killed or blah, 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 without referring the strike happened through whom, and it's an Israeli strike that killed civilians. It should be reported in such language, you know. I think this is a huge responsibility, and you might have a way maybe in writing a guidance in what they should be doing or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can, I'm sorry.
Well, it was just on that point, Billy. I remember I watched very early on, there was a very good Palestinian journalist being interviewed, and I think it was by Sky, and she really challenged the person interviewing her because the person had talked about Palestinians that had died, and she said they didn't just die, they were killed. But that use of language is very, very important, and it's used to manipulate our minds to make people not see the seriousness of that. So I think Marwan's point about us challenging that is important. If you hear things, we should write in, we should have email campaigns and call them out when they're not using correct language. And we assert that. Just in terms of local and national press, I mean, I don't know what your local press is like here. I mean, we do quite a lot in my area, but you know, we have not had huge amounts of coverage despite sending things in. But I think we have to just keep asking them to cover the things that we're doing and putting pressure on them. But I do think, you know, the people that we are targeting, certainly for me, you know, I want to engage more young people and get more people active that maybe haven't been in the past. They're not going to read the local newspaper. They're going to be all over TikTok and all over Instagram. My daughter's in her early 20s. That's all she's always showing me things that are on there. You know, she's always coming to, oh, look at this person. And there are a lot of people on there doing a lot of very good work educating young people about the situation and making them, you know, think about what is happening. So I think, you know, it is good to have those accounts. I'm not brilliant on them, I'm much better on Facebook. But you know, we have to use all of the means that are there to educate everybody in the best way.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to endorse Marwan's point about scrutiny. And it's had, you know, that pressure has had an impact in the last 24 hours. If you remember that the BBC was reporting yesterday morning about what Israel was doing in Lebanon, the language being used was the language from the Israeli Defense Forces. It was talking about an operation in Lebanon. It was talking about an incursion into Lebanon. Actually, that led to a lot of pressure going on them yesterday morning. And from yesterday afternoon onwards, they're now, BBC are talking about an invasion of Lebanon. That wouldn't have happened were it not for that public pressure.
And please know more about the Middle East conflict. It's not a conflict, it's a genocide and a massacre. You can start from there. Yes. Imran, did you have a question?
Okay, great.
One sentence. My view is this.
We need the mic.
My view is this. We shouldn't view the media as our enemy, though they may be. We should view them as our opportunity. We must contact them. We must do it.
Hi, my name is Marwan. Thank you for coming in and giving your talks today. Yeah, I was thinking the other day, what can I do on a practical sort of day-to-day level? And what I wanted to do was just to float an idea and to get your feedback on whether it's legal, whether it's ethical, whether it's right. I work in tech, and in tech, I sort of keep an eye on sort of security things. And there's such a thing called a denial of service attack. I don't know if you've heard of this. This is where you sort of overload servers to stop them from working. And I was thinking, can someone do that on a sort of an average person, a non-techie do that on a sort of personal level? And I thought, well, if we truly have all this support out there, worldwide support out there, then surely we could make it difficult for, or individuals could make it difficult for businesses to operate in Israel. I know about the BDS movement, which sort of targets particular companies, but I thought, how could this sort of work on an individual level? And that I thought, and I'd like to hear your feedback on it.
would be essentially to go on Google Maps, to zoom into Israel, to find companies, and these could be particular companies of a particular type, let's say, they could be hotels, they could be car dealerships, they could be anything where they rely very much so on people calling in, and simply call them up and waste their time. Not be rude, not be threatening, don't make me correct, don't say anything that's wrong, incorrect, but simply to waste their time. And then you can check that, if you look at the international call rates, a 5 minute call would cost under £1, and if thousands of people did that, then those phone lines would be jammed. And it would make it difficult for ordinary businesses to sort of work and to order more supplies, for example, or call up potential sales leads. But there's other sides to this as well, because it potentially also affects probably businesses owned by families who want nothing to do with conflict. So I just wanted to get your feedback on the idea, whether it's a hairbrained, whether it makes any sense, and it's sort of feedback.
Anyone want to take this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Uber did something similar recently in America. They started looking at taxis, and it never showed up.
I think it's a very much, so maybe another version from, while I was hearing you speaking, it came to my mind as well, like something else. Back in 2021, I was in Gaza. It was a war for 10 days, and it was a tough one. And people started to, because there was a lot of scrutiny happening from Facebook about us posting stuff like photos, videos, or some posts about Gaza and the Israeli war on Gaza back then. And there was a campaign that we started to go and do a very much bad review to Facebook. And it becomes something from 5 something to 2 something like this. Yeah, exactly. So also, my point here, the thing is that I was thinking about also like maybe like illegal, like businesses that is functioning in illegal settlements. We can target them by doing the same as you were mentioning, and also doing a bad review on them and do some comments that what you are doing is illegal, like Arian University. It is in illegal settlements. So we should be going and saying in a comments in Google Maps, saying that this is the way that you like function in illegal territory is illegal. It is a war crime, not illegal even. Yes.
I'd just like to add to that, there was a movement about 6 months ago where we were profiling and targeting key celebrities because either their silence or their advocacy towards what was happening on the Israeli side. And everybody basically went and unliked them from their Instas or their posts, and it messed with their algorithms so much that within 2 or 3 days, everyone started becoming a spokesperson for Gaza. It's quite extraordinary. We don't really have any more time for any more questions, but is it a very quick one?
We have this lady as well that's been waiting for a while.
Yeah.
Long time.
Okay. All right. Then.
We're sort of summing up as we go along, aren't we?
Are you okay to do that? Thank you.
I have only something about discussing with people. I always find people talk about Hamas as a terrorist movement, as a movement that really is illegal. I just want to make clear that the word Hamas stands for fighting for the right of the people, for the resistance. It's a resistance movement. And the word Hamas is made up of 4 letters, 4 Arabic letters, which stand for that resistance. It's a resistance of occupation. That's all. I don't know whether anybody's really, but it's very well known by the people.
We're happy.
My question is going to be about young people. We've got it.
Okay.
Someone there in the number.
Yes, oh, okay.
This is a question, not only to Richard, but partly to Richard. We don't hear much about the Friends of Palestine, the Parliamentary group. I don't even know if it's still in existence. Can you shed any light on that? If it is, what is it doing? And is it too much to hope for that we might see some change in Labour's stance as a result of having a new General Secretary? Any thoughts on that?
First of all, in relation to the group I think you're referring to is Labour Friends of Palestine in the Middle East. Yes, it does exist. It is principally a parliamentary group, not out of choice, but just out of resources. The area it operates in, that's one of the reasons I was saying what I was saying at the start. Different groups, different bodies, different individuals operating different forums, and that group is principally involved in lobbying inside the Labour Party and inside Parliament. To that extent, it has actually been reasonably effective, I think, over the last year. If you look at any of the question times that have been coming up around Gaza, or Foreign Office questions, or Prime Minister questions, there have been a lot of questions coming in, a lot of comments coming in from Labour MPs, far, far better than what has come out of the Labour front bench. And if you look at what was the genesis of that, it would have been the coordination that was given not only by Labour Friends of Palestine and the Middle East, but also other organisations like Balfour and so on. But they are still there. If they had more resources, they would be a much more public body, but they just don't have. They haven't got one member of paid staff at the moment. So that's an ongoing issue. In terms of whether there'll be a change in Labour from the new General Secretary, don't know. I really don't know her. I wouldn't have thought she, in that role, will have a major impact on policy. General Secretary role is principally an organisational role. But, you know, the pressure on Labour to be more assertive has had an impact and is having an impact. I say those changes that took place by Labour in government compared to in opposition, things like the restoration of UNRWA funding, things like the call for an immediate ceasefire, things like upholding the right of the ICJ and the ICC to take the action they're taking, they would not have happened were it not for ongoing lobbying, both inside the party from organisations like LFPME, but also the pressure that you and others put on the party from outside. There is still more to do. I think, you know, the comments that have been made in the last 24 hours in Lebanon underlines why there's a lot more yet to do.
I think answering the question, so I think it's, yeah, what the government, the Labour government, we expected to do is a question to us, to you, not to me, but to you, like what you will be doing, pressuring the government to achieve. Keep the pressure on, keep speaking, keep demanding, keep protesting. I think this is really a change, going to make a change. And also like the trade unions. The trade unions are doing a splendid job. Like just there was the annual conference for the trade unions a month ago, and they had a motion there for Palestine, and the motion has been like voted. I think it was I think it has been passed unequivocally. Like no one voted against it, and it was recognizing the state of Palestine
and also calling for immediate ceasefire, a full arms embargo, and it is, as we know, that the trade union is the core movement of labor, and it works. The pressure that the trade unions is bringing to the labor movement, to the Labour Party, is immense and important, and it is working. So I think we need to keep the pressure on from bottom to up, and definitely a change will happen. I think the most important thing now is a full arms embargo, is not just like calling for immediate and permanent ceasefire. It's not about just calling, but the UK government is a B5 country, is a country that has a power in the UN Security Council, and they have a legal responsibility to lead on the applying and the ceasefire in Gaza. But there's a lot of tools for that. They can use the leverage that they have on Israel, starting by a full arms embargo. Secondly, there was a roadmap between Israel and the UK 2023. This roadmap should be freed. They should be like calling it like off as a result. Also like the illegal using that word, the sanctions against Israel is not enough to just imposing a couple of like some financial sanctions on a handful of settlers, 6 or 8, I think, so far. This is not enough. There should be like a full regime of sanction on the Israeli government. People like Smotrich and Balfour, those elements in such a government, but that doesn't mean also like the rest are okay and the rest is okay. But those people should be, a sanction should be imposed on them.
So as we pull this all together, I'm going to invite you to, the panelists to finish off with their closing remarks. Marwan, that sounds very compelling what you just said. Is there anything that you would like to add as your closing remark as to what we can all be doing?
I think the last message is personally. I'm a gardener myself. I lost like 43 members of my family in one missile with the F-35 jets. And this is not just me. There's most of the Gazans have lost someone. But I think, personally speaking, while I was like very much focusing on the demonstrations, I was waiting each Saturday to participate in the demonstration. You know, it was so much amazing feeling for me personally to go down and just like walk with a lot of like amazing people who's like just getting together, showing love and solidarity for the Palestinian people, for the Gazans, and I was feeling embraced at that time, and I still participate in demonstration and protest. I think this is my final message here, protesting, demonstrations.
I think I'd probably just like to make 2 points in closing. The first is something that I made reference to a bit earlier, and that's about making sure that our advocacy is targeted on people who do not already agree with us, and winning new allies. Please don't forget the Jewish community in that. I say that not only because it is important anyway, but you know, the views of diaspora Jews has an impact on public opinion inside Israel itself. Now, you know, over the last few months, the degree of opposition that's been building towards Netanyahu has been huge in Israel. The sad thing is actually in the last 2 weeks, it's probably gone a bit the other way because the action taken in Lebanon has had a lot more popularity, reports are suggesting, than what's been going on in Gaza. But you know, it is important for, you know, bringing down Netanyahu is not a solution. You know, Netanyahu is not the only problem there, but it's a necessary part of making progress out of that. And anything we can do in this country to try to ensure that public opinion inside Israel itself shifts in a more progressive direction is important. And the views of diaspora Jews is going to be really important to that. So linking in with those organisations in the Jewish community that are arguing for a different kind of approach argued by things like the Board of Deputies really important. There's an organisation called NAMAD, which stands for Jews Against Occupation. There's Jews for Justice for Palestinians, and there is YACAD, another organisation, quite mainstream, but very anti-occupation, does some really good work, and I would urge you all to try to link in with them and give them what support they can. You can. The final point is this, and it's really just a word of thanks to you for what you're doing. I know Justice for Palestinians in Leamington has been going for a long, long time now. I think I came to speak to this group, probably it must be more than 10 years ago now. It was a bit smaller then, but you've been working consistently on Palestine and justice for Palestine for that time. And your work is really important, not only in terms of trying to achieve the change we've all been talking about tonight, but, you know, Marwan will know this better than me, but everything I hear from Palestinians, particularly those in Gaza, in the West Bank and elsewhere, is it means so much to know that they have friends abroad who, you know, remember they're there, whether they're in the headlines or not. Certainly over the last year, I mean, I've got friends in Gaza that I try to keep in touch with, just on a direct one-to-one basis, to know that they're not forgotten. And that makes, you know, it doesn't change the overall politics, but it's important to them, and it's part of what solidarity is about. And, you know, the work that you do here in Leamington, in Warwick and Kenilworth, is a really important contribution to that, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you to all of you for everything that you do, because I'm sure you are out campaigning and talking to people every day. I would say, I mean, obviously we want to continue to make sure that the national demonstrations are as big as possible. So I would encourage everybody to get along to those that can. And as has just been said, sometimes people say to me, well, what does a march do? You know, what difference does it make? It has made a difference, what we have done over the past 12 months. It has put pressure on the political leadership. It hasn't put enough pressure on, and they haven't done as much as we want, but it does make a difference. But it makes a massive difference to the people in Palestine. So all of my friends in Palestine, after a march, will message me and say how, you know, how amazed they are that we continue to get thousands and thousands of people out onto the streets in support of them. And it does give them hope. It gives them hope that there are people that will continue to be out there and continue to speak out. And obviously, I want you to really get behind the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign. Look at the Boycott National Committee website if you haven't been on there, and look at the things that you can be doing, because that is a real call from the Palestinian people. And I am always guided by Palestinians in terms of what it is that they need us to be doing, and that is PSC's central drive really to try and deliver what the Palestinian people are asking of us. And the final thing I will say is this: do not be silenced. There has been attempts in all the time that I've been active around Palestine. There have been attempts to silence me. There have been attacks on me and on others I have seen regularly. But I am not going to be silenced, because I speak out and I speak the truth and I speak for justice. And I will never stop doing that until I get justice for the Palestinian people.
Thank you all so much. I'd just like to run through some of my notes, and also just to say these will all be shared on the next newsletter. So if you're not already receiving our Justice for Palestinians newsletter, please talk to one of us and sign up. On top of some of the key points that you've just outlined in your summaries, here are some of the other ideas that we came across. Don't stop, it's working. Ensure ongoing media scrutiny. Call for an objective view of the storytelling and the narrative, not one-sided, a person was killed, but responsibility and accountability. Keep up the conversations with your friends and neighbours. In terms of the press, go local, share your own stories. Boycott. There are websites that you can go to see who you should be boycotting. Go write some negative Google reviews of the people who we should be boycotting.
keep up donating, and let's see what other notes we've got. Keep on turning up for the marches, go back to the trade unions, withhold taxes, keep supporting the companies like ICJ and Amnesty International's, the workplace days of actions as well, get behind those, and yeah, that's pretty much everything. So I'm going to hand over now to Barclay to say thank you and to wrap up, but from our side, thank you very much.
My project, that's what you could call it, is investigating the trauma suffered by Palestinians in conflict. But the message I want to leave with you from myself tonight is this: not one of us has any idea about how bad the war is unless we've actually been there. I've studied this for decades and I have no idea, even though I've studied it. It is beyond imagination. We must continue fighting. I accept that. Put it down. Thank you to the speakers. Please, another round of applause for the speakers. Thank you, Louise, in person here tonight, to turn out. Thank you very much. And of course, online. We, of course, have vigils. We have vigils every week. Our next two vigils are both in Leamington. Correct me if I'm wrong, I got this one last time, but I think we're right. That's good. The vigil on Saturday, the 5th of this Saturday, will be mainly silent, and the occasion to mourn all those who have lost their lives as we approach the anniversary of the 7th of October. We suggest you wear dark clothes and do not bring placards or banners. Okay. So that's a very low-key one, but hopefully very powerful. Also on Facebook page, Instagram pages, or sign up as a member to get our emails. Next Pathways to Peace will be, hopefully, will be in the new year. Details again will be posted out on Facebook and in your email mail outs. There will be a little collection by the front door for medical aid for Palestinians. If you have a few pennies or a few quid, then we're helping those poor people over there in the Middle East. So that just leads me to quote Alexander Pushkin. I'm looking at that lady there. She gave me this quote. Thank you. So the quote from Alexander Pushkin, with Palestine always in our minds, always. Go forth over the land and sea and set the hearts of men on fire with your word. With that, good night and thank you.